Oh, hang on.
You ready to step through the looking glass?
I'm Tim Dunn, and we're back to uncover more secret parts of London's tube network.
This is really going to be fun.
The legendary abandoned stations.
This is extraordinary. Look, oh my goodness.
Wow.
And forgotten subterranean time capsules.
This is incredible, Shane. It's like being in the belly of a beast.
My fellow adventurer is Siddy Holloway.
So how do I get out of here?
She knows these hidden spaces inside out.
Now, genuinely makes sense. It all pieces together at long last.
And has the keys to unlock them.
Ready?
Ready.
To reveal their fascinating untold stories.
Why is there a tube station on the 3rd floor?
Oh, wow.
We'll explore the rich history of stations and lines at the London Transport Museum's depot.
Welcome back to the Store of Wonders.
And delve into its treasure trove of archives.
This is gold dust, Christopher.
Hold on tight for more secrets of the London Underground.
Please mind the gap.
Today,
Oh my gosh. Wow.
where there's a well, there's a way.
What a brilliant engineering solution this is.
And at the depot, restorers are bringing a 1930s carriage back to life.
That's because we... Sorry about the noise, but that's the way it happens here.
Right on cue.
But we're beginning in NW1. The moment I arrive by tube, I'm surrounded by the joyful chaos, buzzing crowds, and colourful culture of Camden Town. In the 1970s, it was the birthplace of British punk, home to the band Madness and, more recently, singer Amy Winehouse. And of course, at its heart is the world-famous Camden Market, with its street food and quirky stalls. Camden Town can be a bit bewildering, not least its underground station, which opened in 1907. Its red-tiled entrance building, designed by architect Leslie Green, is just the tip of an iceberg, perched on top of a labyrinth of tunnels. I'm just hoping that Siddy can help me make sense of it all.
So, Tim, we are at Camden Town Station, one that is frequently visited by tourists coming to London.
This station's obviously been built to handle a lot of people, because it's a massive interchange, isn't it, downstairs? I mean, it's got platforms and junctions all over the place. It's a really busy place.
It really is, and it's changed a lot throughout the years because, of course, they've added branches into it, they've added passageways and escalators and all sorts of things.
Because this building right now, it looks to me like there's a basis here of a Leslie Green station, but there's sort of a few things a bit wrong with it.
Yeah, it's a little bit strange, isn't it? Well, your spidey senses are right. It used to be a bigger station, but got bombed during the Blitz, and so there's nothing to the side of it, but it used to go on further. So it's really quite modified and changed.
And that always means there's loads to explore and disused bits and pieces. So, have you got the keys?
I have got the keys. Let's go.
I've always had a soft spot for Camden, partly because of its alternative edge. But if I'm honest though, it's mainly because of its fascinating railway heritage. In 1839, a huge 30-acre depot was built by the London and Birmingham Railway, just to the north of where the underground station now sits. Horses transported goods from the railway tracks onto the Regent's Canal and the roads. Today, many of the market stalls and shops are set in converted stable blocks and railway arches. So when the Underground came to Camden in 1907, the area was a busy industrial hub, the air full of steam and the noise of locomotives. Back then, there wasn't a pair of DMs or a mohawk hairstyle in sight.
So, Tim, I wanted to take you this way instead of the escalator today because Original tiles!
Of course. These are quite nice, these ones.
Yeah, I really like them. And that baby blue is a really unusual colour, isn't it?
This one's black and white, and this one's blue and cream. So where else do you see these colours?
This is a typical kind of the black and white of the 20s upgrade that they did to the Northern Line. So, you know, especially in the ticket hall, you saw a lot of that green and white and black.
Yeah.
These, I think, look more modern to me, though, than the 20s, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, these ones are quite modern, but these ones are, what, original? And
Yeah,
they're quite
these are
modern.
original. Yeah, so these are from... Oh, have they cried me?
Yeah.
So these are from 1907, when the station first opened.
I mean, this is a lovely colour, though, isn't it? These double stripes all the way down.
Yeah.
It's wonderful stuff.
When the station first opened, it was served by the Charing Cross, Euston and Hampstead Railway. If the lifts were out of use, you could have used the emergency staircase with its 96 steps.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7...
City just wants to check.
These are original stairs, though.
At Camden Town, the railway branched into 2 northern routes, to Golders Green and to Highgate, with the northbound platform arranged above the southbound on both routes. Today, they're the Edgware and High Barnet branches of the Northern Line. In 1924, services on the City branch of the Northern Line were extended to Camden Town. This involved adding further tunnels and a complex crossover system to join the lines together. The 1920s upgrade also saw the introduction of escalators and the removal of the lifts. The original passages that provided access to the platforms were sealed off, but something tells me, and maybe it's the hard hat and high vis, the City knows where they are.
After you.
Thank you. Oh, this is a grubby corridor.
Oh, yes, sorry. So this is actually an original passageway from the Edgware branch platform to the lift. And actually, because this is a bit of a labyrinth, this station, always has been.
Yes.
So you see the bridge over this here. So that is a bridge over the southbound platform that's below. Because the original Charing Cross, Euston and Hampstead Railway, the Charing Cross branch of the Northern Line, it always had 4 platforms here because of the 2 branches of it going to Highgate and to Hampstead.
OK, so they've always gone up and down that way, so the platform layout hasn't changed, but why have the tunnel layouts changed?
Well, this is, you know, escalators, widening it out, the change in the 20s, adding the City branch, of course, so it's all, you know, been kind of chopped and changed. And you see here, actually, they've smoothed this corner out.
Ah, because it's an air vent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
And now, it may not look like it, but these are the entrances into the old lift shafts. So you see the cornice work here?
Yeah, you've got the cords and lintel. Of course, this is a classic Leslie Green lift,
yeah,
right?
I know. And so it's actually, the floor's been raised here because normally we wouldn't be this close to the corner of the lift entrance. But so that is how people got in and out of the station.
Brilliant. It's all still here?
Yeah. And now it's a VP, a ventilation point. But there is a fan in there. I don't think we should go in there if you think this is grubby.
But there's another space down here that's crying out to be explored. We might just have to watch our heads.
It's very small.
That's a weirdly small door.
It is. Ah.
Oh, heck.
Okay.
It's like we get Alice in Wonderland again.
I know. I do enjoy these little doors. Oh, so this is just another passageway.
Yeah.
But it's going down instead of up.
Right.
Heading down to the southbound platform, or one of the 2 southbounds.
So this used to be one of those, passenger tunnels with all these tiles down the side of it?
Yeah, and it's not been in passenger use for a long time, but as you can see, it is being used to store quite a lot of equipment.
So if that's a platform that way, this is surely the end of the disused section of Camden Town.
You are right, there isn't more disused parts here, but there is something else even deeper than this station that used to be connected to it that I think we should go and explore. Out of the grime, into more grime.
They say grime doesn't pay. except when it's hiding the more fascinating secrets of the London Underground. Camden Town is one of the busiest stations on the Underground network, with over 20 million passengers passing through its ticket barriers in 2019. The vast majority heads to Camden's world-famous market. As the tube-borne tourists make their way towards the trendy stalls and eateries, they might pass an unusual, curved brick building. I doubt many of them have even noticed it, let alone have a clue as to what it is. But it looks to me as if it could be something to do with the Underground. I'm meeting Mo Gadgia, lead project engineer at TfL, round the back of the station to find out more about it. But first I want to understand that complex system of underground train tunnels just outside the station.
Just to the south of the existing station, there's a set of crossovers. Obviously, the Northern Line's quite a complicated line. You've got two branches from the north, two branches from the south, and they all meet together at Camden. But then when the line was extended in the 20s, and what's now the Bank branch joined in, that Y shape turned into X's, and what was a relatively simple 2 lines in, 4 lines out, became a sort of a mess on a number of different levels.
The stomach diagram on this 1920s poster heralding the new junction looks more like the inside of a human heart. And this complex junction system is almost as clever as anyone who's used Camden Town will tell you.
What the junctions allow it to do is that any train going south, no matter where it comes from, can go into any southbound, and similarly in the reverse, any train coming north, either from Mornings Crescent or Euston, can pick whether to go to High Barnet or Edgware.
It gives opportunities for passengers to change all over the place.
I mean, it's definitely of use to passengers because one of the things you don't have to do is you can pick your train earlier and you don't have to make a change at Camden. And it basically means that you've got a lot more flexibility along the line. It makes it slightly more complicated if you don't know the line. But for those who do, they can pick where they want to go from the start of a journey and just carry on up the route.
When the Camden crossover was built in the 1920s, there was no other system of junctions like it in the world. It had 8 different sets of points. The movement of trains through the junctions was controlled by 43 levers in a signal room at the station.
When they built them, they're getting up to sort of 110 trains per hour moving through those junctions, and they're all being controlled from there locally.
That's one every 30 seconds or so. I mean, that's extraordinary.
Just the amount of trains that you could get through there and the capacity, and actually being able to send them in different places, coming from different places, send them in different places, was, for its time and even now, it's extraordinary.
But what about that brick building just behind us?
But is this part of the tube station structure?
So the building you can see behind us is the head house for a deep level shelter. There are 2 of these, and the deep level shelter actually sits below Camden Town Station and connects into it.
A head house is the part of a subway structure which is above ground. The deep level shelter was one of 8 built beneath underground stations in the early 1940s for people to shelter from bombing during the Second World War. And though once connected to the station, it is now an entirely separate structure.
You've got 2 very large tunnels on 2 levels with tunnels that cross between the 2. It was obviously used during the Second World War. Essentially, since then, it's been used as storage, but it's stayed there ever since, because once you've got a space underground,
use it.
You use it, you know.
I'm now rejoining my partner in crime, Siddy, as she's promised me a tour of Camden's deep level shelter. She's brought me to a second head house, a few hundred metres south of the first one, because this is the only accessible entrance to the shelter below.
Smell that?
Lovely.
It's very much.
Until recently, the shelter was being used for archive storage.
This is really weird.
But now it's empty and rather damp.
It smells interesting, doesn't it? It's got what I would call the deep level shelter aroma.
Oh, it's fabulous. Right, OK, well, there's a lift and some stairs and...
Yep.
Down that way?
Yes, so this one goes to the lower level, this one to the upper, I think. Lower level?
Let's go.
Just like the deep-level shelter at Clapham South, which Siddy and I explored a few years ago, the Camden shelter was also designed to hold up to 8,000 people. Intended to be used as a shelter at night time only, they would sleep in dormitories in a pair of parallel tunnels, each one 400 metres long and subdivided into 2 decks, an upper and lower level.
It's a long way down.
How far is that?
It's about 38 metres below the surface. Before we go properly into the shelter, there's something over here I want to show you first.
The southbound platforms at Camden Town are 18 metres below ground level, so the shelter tunnels are a further 20 metres below those tracks.
Oh, flipping heck. Look at that. Wow.
I know. So this is one of 4 jet engine-sized fans that were placed in the shelters in order to help ventilate the entire facility.
Is it jet engine sized? Are these electric or what?
These are electric, yeah, and essentially pulling air out of the shelter. The southern shelters, so south of the river, had their fans mounted vertically. So you normally sort of would look up at them if you were standing underneath them. But here you get a really good sense of how enormous they are.
Fans of Doctor Who might recognise these passages because the shelter was used for filming the 1977 serial The Sunmakers, with Tom Baker playing the Doctor. Well, it is rather like a TARDIS down here.
It goes on forever.
So through here is a delight of one of these shelters.
Oh, yeah.
I can hear the conviction in your
The slight
voice.
concern of, oh, good Lord.
So this is the former men's lavatory block.
Well, thank you for bringing me down to the toilet,
I
Sid.
mean, it's only the best for you. So this was converted into an archive, and those rackings are still up here.
So is that why this whole thing has survived for so long and fairly intact, right?
Yes.
Because it's been used for archive storage.
That's it, yeah. Well, they moved the archive out of here a few years ago, and now it's just, well, sitting and waiting for its next purpose. Strong smell down here.
Whereas the toilets were located in one of the small side tunnels, people would have slept in the wider parallel tunnels, which are just under 5 metres in diameter.
Come on through. Here is one of the dormitories. Normally these would be reserved for mothers with babies or somebody needing extra space. And then families would be allocated these little booths, really, to sleep in.
All 7 deep-level shelters along the Northern Line were built during the Blitz, but were only finished in 1942, after the Blitz was over. To save money, the government held off opening them to the public. But in 1944, the arrival of V-1 flying bombs and later V-2 rockets struck fear into the hearts of Londoners. The Camden Town shelter finally opened on July the 16th, 1944, but it was short-lived.
This shelter actually closed 2 days before VE Day in 1945, and it wasn't used by civilians again after that, whereas the Clapham shelter became a public hostel and hotel after it stopped being a shelter.
Right, OK.
After the war, it was hoped all the deep-level shelters along the Northern Line could become running tunnels for a new Northern Line express route. That line was never built, but all the deep-level shelters had connections with existing stations.
So this would have been connected to Camden Town Station back when this was still a shelter.
This is a direct connection to the platforms and tunnels of the main station.
Yes, but it's been doubly bricked up. There is no access to Camden Town Station. I don't even know where that comes out. So there's no way for us to jump on the tube, I'm afraid. You know, I've been to almost all of the other deep shelters. Something about this one feels particularly derelict and kind of forgotten.
It's a bit strange, isn't it, this one? It is so completely desolate. I think it's time we left and got back on the tube, but the long way around, perhaps.
I know, wouldn't it be great if we could just get through there?
Go on, down that way. Let's go home. Here's a brain teaser for you. The Northern Line runs through Camden Town Station, and we've explored its deep shelters. But which Northern Line station has the deepest platforms on the Underground? Earlier, I asked which Northern Line station has the deepest platforms on the whole network. The answer is Hampstead, because the station is on a hill. The platforms reach a depth of 58.5 metres below ground level. Now that is underground. Hampstead Heath is a rather nice spot in which to escape the capital, take in some fresh air and enjoy some leisure time. Wouldn't it be great if the London Underground could take you all the way to the seaside? Well, it did, once upon a time. Historian Catherine Ferry specialises in architecture and seaside culture and has come to the museum's depot to tell me more about this special underground service. Catherine, we're standing alongside some ticket machines, are quite modern things, but there's a rather interesting ticket, isn't there, that some Londoners could buy?
Yes, and it's quite a surprising one, because between 1910 and 1939, you could buy a through ticket on the Underground to Southend.
To Southend?
Southend-on-Sea, absolutely.
That's a long way out east.
It is, exactly. But the District Line did a deal with the London, Tilbury and Southend Railway to share their line. So you could buy a through ticket from Ealing Broadway all the way to Southend. It could take just 90 minutes to get from Ealing Broadway to Southend, and it was a cheap excursion fare.
Because excursion trains have been around for years, haven't they? It's kind of a thing to do going to the seaside.
Absolutely, and excursion fares were really important in opening up the seaside to all classes. So the excursion fares we're talking about on the District Line were predominantly going to be used by poorer families. They were third-class tickets, mostly, and it really opened up Southend to a bigger audience.
By the early 20th century, Southend in Essex was a popular seaside town, but it wasn't accessible by rail to the majority of Londoners. Trains bound for Southend commenced at London's Fenchurch Street station, which had no connection to the Underground.
There were places where particular groups of Londoners would go by tradition. So if you lived in South London, you'd go south. You know, you'd go down to Brighton, you'd go to those South Coast resorts. If you lived in the east of London, Southend was your destination. But with the District Line, West Londoners could take that opportunity as well. So you took your District Line train and the carriages as far as East Ham or Barking, and that's where it stopped until 1932. In 1932, the line was electrified to Upminster, so you could change there. They actually put London, Tilbury and Southend tank engine onto the District Line carriages to pull it the rest of the way down the line to Southend.
That's a brilliant solution.
It is, exactly. It's the two lines working together. So I've got some images of the posters from the time that I think are really interesting.
Lovely. So are these posters things that are being used to advertise the services of the railway?
Advertising cheap day returns, that is the crux of these, that they all say cheap return tickets on them because it is about appealing to that excursion market. But what's really interesting about that Southend posters is they don't very often sort of give that sense of the Cockney tripper going out. You know,
No.
that's quite it's a really striking image by Charles Pears, but it's very much about the sea.
Charles Pears, who was best known for his marine paintings, became a prolific poster artist for the London Underground in the 1920s and 30s. And his colourful, aspirational designs, often featuring a bathing belle, tempted day trippers to visit the Essex resort.
And here's another one by Charles Pears, which you can see the pier just in the background there. So we've definitely got the crowds on the piers,
Yeah.
but the yachts and the water here suggest that this is quite a sort of a yachting centre, which is not what you associate with Southend at all. So something like this poster where you've got the bandstand and these elegant people listening to the band play in their deck chairs.
Very genteel, isn't it?
Yes, that's maybe appealing more to the West London audience, perhaps, from Ealing Broadway, yes.
I mean, this looks like it could be something like Baron's Court or Turnham Green. You know, it feels like it's somewhere...
Home from home.
Yes.
Yes, but with the sea.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly, yes.
The Underground's seaside service ran for 29 years, coming to an end in 1939 with the outbreak of the Second World War. After the war, the old and exhausted District Line stock was replaced with a new fleet of trains to represent the optimism in post-war Britain. I'm catching up with Siddy, curator of Hidden London at the London Transport Museum, who's going to show me what they came up with.
Welcome to the R stock, Tim. What do you think?
Say that really carefully, Sid. The R stock. Do you mean the R stock, right?
Letter R stock. But I think this is a really lovely train. So it was in service from 1952 until 1983. What do you think of it?
Well, it's a fascinating train, isn't it? Because inside it feels like almost like an Edwardian gentleman's sitting room or a parlour. But outside it's so modern. And actually, this was exhibited at the 1951 Festival of Britain as being the future of London transport.
I love that. And, you know, the reason I thought it would be great for us to come in here is because this particular train used to run through the station I've just visited. I'm in the wealthy borough of Kensington and Chelsea. Sloane Square is a stone's throw from the King's Road and Sloane Street with their designer shops and stylish cafes. Its underground station is right next to the Royal Court Theatre, currently showing a play with a very apt title. The station is the gateway to one of the most expensive postcodes in London, but that wasn't always the case. It may be hard to believe, but at the beginning of the 19th century, the area I'm standing in was more of a village, a small residential part of London. But by the middle of the century, that started changing, with commercial buildings being built in its stead and lots of shops. Then in 1868, the Metropolitan District Railway opened the station behind me, Sloane Square, and that further catapulted the area's change. Slum houses made way for affluent residential buildings, and today Sloane Square is an upmarket part of London. The first iteration of Sloane Square station looked very different to how it does today. It was built in 1868, just 5 years after the birth of the London Underground. Then underground trains were powered by steam, not electricity. Conventional steam locomotives were fitted with pipes to condense the exhaust steam into side tanks of cold water to reduce steam billowing into the tunnels. The District Line is the second oldest underground railway, and when it first opened, there were only 5 stations on the line between South Kensington and Westminster Bridge, and Sloane Square was one of them. It's now served by both the modern-day District and Circle lines. But before I start my exploration of the secret parts of the station, there's some unexpected history to be found, right in front of waiting passengers' eyes. We're now on the westbound platform, and this here is today a refreshment shop, so you can go in there and buy snacks or anything you might need before you jump on a tube train. But back in the mid-1980s, this was a pub called the Hole in the Wall. Now, if you weren't travelling on the Underground, you could also buy a platform ticket to enter the premises. Back in the 1930s, there was even a pub cat that lived in the Hole in the Wall called Kim. So you could have come off a train, walked into the pub, grabbed a pint, and had a little play with Kim the cat.
A platform pub with a cat seems like a fairly strange concept to us now. But it wasn't strange in the 1930s, and even during the First World War in 1916, there were at least 14 pubs on the London Underground. The show-stopping feature constructed by the Victorians in 1868 was this huge glazed arched roof over the tracks, seen here in a later photo from 1926.
Now, standing here on the platform, I'm seeing quite a bit of original features, including the arch on that side, which would have been the original one of the cut and cover used to construct this station. And over here we see the revetments, or the walls of the station, and even some of the cast iron mounts for the original roof. But behind me is probably the most interesting part of this station.
A casual observer might think this cast iron structure spanning the tracks is a footbridge. But this doesn't carry people. Because the most amazing thing about Sloane Square Station is what's actually inside this structure. It's part of London's forgotten history. I'm at Sloane Square Station in the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. I'm on the westbound platform of the District and Circle line, and above me, suspended from the girders, is something quite extraordinary.
Inside that conduit is one of London's lost rivers, the River Westbourne. And I'm going to go take a closer look.
If you were asked which river flows through London, you'd answer the Thames, and you'd be right. But there are also many smaller tributaries that feed the Thames. You just can't see them anymore. In the 19th century, as London's population boomed, many of these tributaries were forced into subsurface pipes or sewers. That's fine if you want to build above ground. But what if you want to construct a subsurface underground station and there's a river in the way? Here at Sloane Square, I've got the keys to a room which reveals the secret of how they did it.
This is really exciting because... oh my gosh! Wow! That is the River Westbourne. It's flowing into the space below me here, and then these giant pumps are pumping the water up into the conduit that goes across the platforms. I mean, it's really loud in here. And it smells quite fresh, actually. It smells like a well or something like that. Like there's a lot of moving water here. Oh, look at that. This really feels like a forgotten part of London's infrastructure, and it's just off the platform where there are hundreds of passengers passing through right at this minute.
Victorian engineers probably used this up and over technique rather than burying the river under the tracks because it was easier to inspect and maintain the conduit if they could see it.
One of the pumps just kicked into action. You can really feel the power of those pumps having to deal with this huge amount of water. I mean, what a brilliant engineering solution this is.
Brilliant engineering solutions have defined the London Underground since its birth in 1863, and they're still needed today. To find out more, I've arranged to meet Transport for London's Ted Fowler, who's the head of Built Environment and Architecture.
What are some of the biggest challenges with that job?
Generally speaking, looking after 160-year-old-ish buildings brings its own challenges. And one of our big worries is things falling down. bits of tiles, bits of ceiling trim, that kind of stuff, that tends to be what worries us, and it's often caused by water getting into the station. Sometimes there's a sewer or there's even a watercourse right beside where you are, and that wants to get into the tunnel because you built a nice place for it to go.
Speaking of a waterway being close to a station, obviously here at Sloane Square, we've got the River Westbourne, which is going over the platforms. A fantastically Victorian thing, that, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it shows you the kind of challenges that they were facing when they were trying to build the district line. You know, when we're trying to plan new stations, which is something that I'm involved in at the moment, we have some of the same problems. You know, we're trying to thread something in around a really busy city, trying to make sure we don't impact customers as much as we can. And, you know, the underground isn't the only thing that's below the ground. We've got, you know, fibre optic cables, sewers, water pipes, electricity cables, and you're trying to weave anything in between all of those and an existing underground network is obviously a challenge.
Towards the end of the 1930s, Sloane Square Station was closed to allow for extensive refurbishment work. It reopened in March 1940 with a new booking hall and new escalators down to the platforms, the very first ones in a subsurface station. The Victorian glass roof above the platforms was retained, but disaster was about to strike.
During the height of the Blitz on the 12th of November 1940, a bomb landed in the middle of the station, destroying the glass canopy, the station building, which then collapsed down onto the track where a train was departing, full of people.
Tragically, 42 people lost their lives at Sloane Square Station that day. And the remodelled station, which had only been open for 8 months, was all but obliterated.
In the aftermath of that destruction, London Transport did a remarkable job of restoring Sloane Square to service, and in early 1941, it reopened with temporary access points.
It's testament to the skill and bravery of the people building it that this temporary structure was open and running less than 12 weeks after the blast. Even more remarkable was that the bomb failed to destroy the conduit carrying the River Westbourne. After the war, Sloane Square was rebuilt for a second time to coincide with the Festival of Britain in 1951. And in the 1960s, a 6-storey office block was constructed above the station, which is still there today. The station has been through so many dramatic changes, it's amazing anything survives from its early history. But in the final room on my tour, there are some fascinating remnants of Sloane Square's first rebuild almost 100 years ago.
So these tiles are from the 1930s renovation of the station. This is the only part of that renovation that still survives. So these would have been poster frames here, and then just down below, this mint green sort of tile border was quite extensively used for refurbishments of stations in the 1930s. And now it's a locker room. But it's amazing that some of it still survives.
The museum's depot in West London isn't just a storage facility. It's also a workshop where curators and volunteers help conserve and restore objects for future generations to enjoy. Over in a corner, a team is restoring a unique piece of transport history. 3 of the last Q-stock underground carriages, known as cars, from the 1930s. They ran on the district line through Sloane Square until the late 60s. Restoration of one of the driving motor cars is now complete, but I'm meeting Jeff Thorne, technical leader of the project, to see how work is going on Q-stock number 4416. Jeff, thank you so much for letting us come into this vehicle, because this is an operating environment, isn't it? You're restoring this car.
Well, this will be restored so that it looks very similar to what it was like after the Second World War. The whole aura of the train will be from that period. The one thing that won't exist is we won't have the nicotine, because
Thank goodness for that.
there was a lot of cigarette smoke in those days, and the nice white paint very soon went cream, so we're not replicating that at all. And this particular car dates from 1939. It was delivered new from Gloucester Railway Carriage and Wagon Company, and the interior is very much Art Deco. But this is where the lights are going to be, hanging down from all these wires you can see from the ceilings.
So you're putting in kind of like old-style light bulbs, or how are you going to do this?
The bulbs themselves will be modern LED bulbs. That's because we've got a... Sorry about the noise, but that's the way it happens here.
Right on cue.
We've got a power budget, the amount of current we can take from the batteries. So the old lamps were incandescent bulbs. They took a lot of power, about 2 kilowatts for a car like this. When we moved to light-emitting diode bulbs, it's down to about 300 watts. It's a very significant saving.
One of my favourite features of this car is actually on the outside. These stylish flares scream 1930s Art Deco to me. But it turns out they're not a fashion statement.
In the old days, before this train was introduced, there was a lot of hand-worked door stock, and you could pull them open. But people used to run after the train after it was leaving the platform, open the door by standing on the step board outside. Quite dangerous. So the idea was, well, if we put a nice flare on the side, there's nothing for you to put your foot on, so you can't do that.
But what's particularly special about this car is what you can't see, unless you get on your hands and knees and crawl underneath it.
If you go back to the sort of early days of electric traction on the Underground, it's all come from America. It's American technology, and there was a financier called Tyson Yerkes, a bit of a rogue, but he bought a lot of money, and he bought 50 or so engineers over from America. The equipment that is fitted to this train underneath has got a direct lineage back to the American designers from before the First World War. So when it operates, it's not nice and smooth. You can hear the equipment going clunk, 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 clunk as the train accelerates, and you feel little jerks. It's a different experience. It's taking you back in time to the technology of around 1913, 1914.
What is the long-term plan for this train as a unit then? What do you hope to do with it?
It will run heritage trips a number of times during the year, carrying passengers. At other times it will be here in the depot.
A moving museum, right?
Well, it will be a moving museum, absolutely.
It's beautiful.
Next time,
Oh, wow.
we visit a relic at the heart of London's Museum Quarter.
This is unexpected.
Well, this is the undergrowth, the Underground.
And Sydney is at the capital's youngest mainline terminus.
Ooh, this is a secret hidden in plain sight.